Tracy has finally done it.
Paul Tracy survives a spin to win the Rio 400.
He ran just a spurt of fuel, and Paul Tracy's going to get it.
To welcome home Paul Tracy, winner of the inaugural Grand Prix of St. Petersburg.
You got to win. And if you're winning everything and kicking ass and winning championships, you're going to get noticed.
Don't do that shit to me or to anybody on the front straightaway like that. Never.
You did something another guy didn't like, like they would come get in your face and let you have it.
Now Tracy trying to set up on Nigel Mansell.
And remember, Mansell, as you see him being repassed there by Tracy, has never run on an oval before.
He won the championship, but he won 5 races. I won 5 races. I threw away 3 wins.
Tracy looks to the outside. Oh, and the car in trouble right on against the wall. White flag.
In my opinion, I know that I was ahead of him when the light was yellow.
Wow, Alex Zanardi, who invented the maneuver, would be proud of that little number.
For me, the races in Canada were the biggest races of the year for me. They were the most important for me to do well at.
All right, welcome back to the Open Wheel Racing Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Notoff, and my guest today, he needs no introduction. He's the 2003 CART World Series champion. He won 31 races in IndyCar, and of course, he is the host of the Racers Unchained podcast. Paul Tracy, such a huge honor to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. I've watched a couple of your podcasts with Richie and PJ, and so I've kind of found it on YouTube because my stuff's on there, and your stuff popped up, so I've watched a couple of them.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And obviously I love your podcast. And that kind of leads me into my first question. You launched your podcast about 8 months ago. Your first episode was with Max Pappas. And I hadn't seen you in a while. And the first thing that stuck out to me was how physically fit you look. I hadn't seen you in a while. And so just curious, if you don't mind sharing, I mean, you've gone through, in my opinion, a physical transformation. Could you give us some insight into what your daily fitness regime is to get so fit?
Well, I just was like, about 3 years ago, I went into the doctor. I wasn't feeling so hot, and I was like, I wouldn't say I was, I was pretty fat. My face was big. I had a belly going. I wasn't like, I had some muscle on me, but I just went into the doctor for a checkup. I was doing a physical, and they did some blood work, and the guy called me back and said, "Oh man, you're a pre-diabetic and this, that, and we want to put you on blood thinners." And I'm like, "Fuck, I gotta get back in shape." But just, I was just eating far too much, not watching what I ate. Frankly, drinking too much wine. 2-3 glasses a night. It's too much sugar every night, before bed. And I just cut all that out. And I was going to the gym. Like I would still go to the gym every day and work out, but I'd go to my local gym and I'd end up, you'd be there 2 hours, but you'd bullshit around with people for 2 hours, for an hour, right? And I wasn't really working out that hard. I was working out enough to keep some muscle on me, but also a layer of fat on top of that. So, I got on a diet. I cut my sugar way back. And then I lost some weight, and then I got on my bike and I've always enjoyed riding a bicycle, a 10-speed bike. That was my form of exercise when I was, for a long time. I've been doing it since the early 90s, or even when I was a kid. I used to just go out on my bike when I was a kid and just go on my BMX bike with my buddies, and my parents would say, "Be home before dark." And I would leave the house at 8 in the morning and ride my bicycle for 12 hours. So I've always enjoyed the freedom of riding a bike, and but when you get really fat and you just talk yourself out of getting on the bike, because it's not easy, especially going uphill. So I, like I said, I cut my sugar intake way back, cut the amount of food I was eating way back, lost some weight. Then I got on my bike and I started out at like 10 miles, and then 10 miles went to 20 miles, and then it went to 30 miles each ride. And now I do like 40 to 50 every morning, I'll do like a 2-hour ride every morning, and it's just my routine. I need, and I need to do it just to, I don't really now watch my diet all that much. I pretty much eat whatever I want, but I've burned, you know, 15 to 1800 calories before 9 in the morning. So I can get away with, having some sugar or having a cookie or having some ice cream, things like that.
Yeah, well, you look great, and your Instagram is very inspiring for me. I'm now back up on my inside bike. I used to do triathlons, and
Yeah.
I'm battling the weight thing myself. So
Well,
I appreciate the
you know how hard
motivation.
it is when you go out and like when you're fat and you look outside and you see the flag blowing and the trees blowing and you're like, I'll go tomorrow, and tomorrow turns into next week and next week turns into next month. And the next thing you know, a year goes by and you haven't ridden because you talk yourself out of it. And now, regardless of what it is, I don't talk myself out of it. If it's windy, I go. If it's, as long as it's not pouring rain, I've gone out and it's started to rain, but like 100-degree heat or 35, I'll go out and get it over with, and that's just purely discipline. And you know how it is when you've done triathlons. It's all discipline. It's easy to talk yourself out of doing things. And as well, when you don't work out, you lose that cycling fitness or you lose your running fit. It takes so long to get the fitness, to get it really good, and it's gone. Like you take a week or two off the bike and you lose everything you've gained,
Oh, nothing's worse than getting sick when you're in prime fitness and have to rebuild it. Um, well, let's hop into your racing career a bit. If you don't mind, I want to go all the way back to 1990. You were dominating the American Racing Series, or Indy Lights, and you had a couple interesting opportunities that actually came your way that you turned down. So I was curious to get some insight into that. So you got one from Eddie Jordan to go race for his Formula 3000 team. And for folks that don't remember, Formula 3000 was essentially the feeder series to F1. I think it's, now modern day F2. And then you got an opportunity offered an opportunity to race for TruSport, which was the Budweiser car with Scott Pruitt there before he got injured. But I think for the 1991 season. And they, you were too young, I guess, for Budweiser. And so I think they just ended up offering you a 4-race deal, but you walked away from that too. So I was curious, without anything else on the horizon, you stepped away from, an outsider. Those seem like awesome opportunities. What was really your mindset for taking that gamble?
Yeah, I mean, I went over. My dad is from Ireland. My mom's from England. I have a lot of relatives in England. And when I was growing up, we used to go karting in Europe. I raced in the World Championships a couple times. My era of karting, I raced against Schumacher and Hakkinen. A lot of guys that made it to Formula One. Morbidelli, were all guys that I raced against. So, and then once I started racing cars, I went to England quite a bit to do some car racing. And during that time, when I was 16, 17, racing Formula Fords, Formula 2000. In that time was, Eddie Irvine. It was a lot of F1 guys that were in Formula Fords at that time. Damon Hill. It's just a bunch of guys that made it to Formula One during that time in the mid 80s. And so I was kind of on the radar of some European teams because they'd seen me come over from Canada and run up front. And I had raced in Canada for a factory Van Diemen team, and then we had a Reynard, and then I moved up, did some Formula Atlantic in the States and in New Zealand, and then we went to Indy Lights in 1988, and I actually started racing then against PJ, who was on the show, was in Indy Lights then, and I won my first race with that I'd ever run on an oval, which was in the first race of the series was here in Phoenix, and I won that race my first time. Had a decent year. Then the second year of Indy Lights that we did, my dad thought, okay, we're gonna start our own team. I'm gonna rent a shop in Indy, hire a couple guys. We found a couple guys out of England that had run Formula 3 and Formula 3000 cars, but they didn't really have any American experience, and they didn't have any oval experience. We rented this space in the back of a lawnmower repair shop to work on the car. We had, and kind of ran it ourselves, and it was a disaster. Like it was fun. The guys that we brought over were super cool guys. We had a fun time, but no results in '88. And then we were kind of at a crossroad of what do we do? And I got invited over to England to do a test, a Formula 3000 test with Eddie Jordan. And it was kind of a shootout test between myself and a couple other drivers. It was Eddie Irvine, John Alesi, David Brabham, and myself. And it was at Silverstone. And we did the test, and test went really well. I remember David Brabham crashed because the track was like, it was half wet, half dry for the first bit, and he crashed the car like right away in the drying conditions. And I had a good test, and it really came down to it was a decision by Camel. The team was sponsored by Camel cigarettes, and I was pretty young. We were all pretty young. But I was only like 18, 19. And Camel cigarettes didn't sell cigarettes in Canada. They didn't really think they could market me in Europe because I wasn't, European. So they chose John Alesi and Eddie Irvine were the driver choices for that. So came back and we put a deal together with Lanford Racing. They were going to fund the car, pretty much most of the budget to run me. With Tom Christoph was the owner of Lanford Homes in Canada, a big home developer, and teamed up with Brian Stewart, ran the team. And I had actually known Brian Stewart because I raced here. He ran a car for a guy named Scott Maxwell in Canada, who was a sports car driver for a long time, raced for Panos and raced for a bunch of different prototype teams. Him and I raced Formula Fords against each other, and we were like we like really fought hard in Formula Fords and F2000. So Brian knew me. He knew I was quick. We put the deal together. We didn't have to come up with a lot of money because most of the budget was paid for by the Lanford guys. And that year it was a home run. I won 9 out of 11 races, and it was like just dominated the whole thing. And that gave me the opportunity at the end of that, when I won the championship. Steve Horn obviously was watching me, who ran the Budweiser TruSports team. He said, I'm going to run you in a 2-day test to see how you go. And it was at Mid-Ohio, and it was right after the Mid-Ohio race. I won the Indy Lights race at Mid-Ohio. And then we were testing like the Tuesday, Wednesday right after. It was my first time in an IndyCar. And it went great. I mean, I would have qualified the car inside the top 10. I was quicker than Raul Boisel, who was the replacement driver at that time for Scott Pruitt, who had broken his legs. And everything was great. I'm like, oh, this everything's going perfect. They signed me to a kind of a interim contract to find sponsorship. And I moved down to Ohio, and I was based out of the shop and used their gym and used their trainer through the winter. And they went to Budweiser, and Budweiser, I was only 20 at the time, and Budweiser was like, hey, he's not even old enough to drink, and then we approached, we tried to find the money to do it. Budweiser had just launched in Canada through Labatt's brewery in Canada. So we thought maybe we could tie it in with Labatt's. Labatt's had sponsored an IndyCar with John Jones, and but the limiting thing was I wasn't even old enough to drink in the States. I was 20 years old, so it kind of got declined. and nothing came of it. But it put my name on the radar, that people could see that I was fast in an Indy car. And then ultimately my first race was in 91, was at Long Beach with Dale Coyne, and that was simply my dad refinanced our house, pulled money out of the house to pay for that. My mom went berserk. When you're a kid and you're sitting in your bedroom and you can hear your mom screaming at your dad, "You freaking idiot, what are you doing? You're crazy." So it was like one of those things. My dad took a big gamble on me, and I mean, it was just like one of those things where, like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and maybe we'll make enough money to get to the next race, or maybe we'll make enough prize money. And we went to Long Beach. I qualified pretty decent in the car. I think I was the 4th, 14th, 12th, something like that. And then right away in the race, a water pipe broke on the motor, and the car overheated, and that was it. It was over in 10 or 15 laps, and I didn't have anything. And I was sitting in the infield by the hockey arena, what are they called, the aquarium or whatever, or not the aquarium, but just the hockey arena in the middle of the track. And I was sitting there talking to a friend of mine that I raced against, Mark Smith, and a Penske guy came by, and he stopped on his scooter and said, "Hey, Roger wants to see you after the race, so come to the truck after the race." And then that was how everything came together.
So you were probably on his radar before that race, though, right? Was it from Indy Lights and
I don't know.
the testing you did?
I don't know if I was on his radar or not on his radar, but I went to the truck after the race, and I didn't know what I was going there for. I thought I was in trouble for doing something on track, or got in Emerson's way, or got in Rick Mears' way, or Danny Sullivan's way, or you know what I mean? So I didn't know why they were calling me to the truck. And I went to the truck, and Roger said to me, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, we're going to try to find, we're out of money, but we're going to try to find a sponsor and go to the Indy 500 and try to qualify there. And he's like, okay, well, wait till I call you. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, okay. So I left the track, and, a month went by. No, there was no phone call. There was no cell phones then. It was landline. So, I just thought it was just like, oh, whatever, like wait till I call you. Right. So we tried to raise the money to go to Indy. Couldn't find the money. It was expensive. Even back then was expensive. And, we're sitting at home watching qualifying, me and my dad, at Indy on TV, and Rick Mears put it on the pole in 91. And 6:00 it's over, Saturday night, and about 7:00 the phone rings. My dad picks up the phone, and it's Roger on the line. He says, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" He goes, "Well, we're just at home." He goes, "How far do you live from Detroit?" My guy was about 4.5 hours. He goes, "Meet me at my office at midnight in Detroit. And here's the address. Write the address down." So my dad writes it down, and we have dinner, hop in the car, and we drove to Detroit, and walked in the office of Penske, and he had a contract on the table, and he said, Here's a contract, sign it, or I have another driver waiting to sign it in a hotel right now.
Incredible. So you signed it, obviously, as we know.
Yeah.
What was the scope of the contract? It was initially a testing contract, but you did eventually obviously get to race in the 91 season.
Yeah, they basically told me, look, you're going to move to Reading, Pennsylvania. You're going to work in the shop with the guys to learn about the cars. You're going to go to the gym, our gym in the shop, and we're going to test. We're going to put you in tests, and we'll evaluate if we're going to run you in a race. But right now, there's no guarantee that we're going to do that, but we're going to see how it goes. So it was a 5-year contract, and my dad said, well, can we have a lawyer read this contract? And Penske was like, no. He goes, you sign it, or I got another driver waiting to sign it. And I found out later on that the other driver that was basically waiting on it was Mike Groff, who was the Indy Lights champion the year before in '89. Later on, ended up driving for Rahal. But, basically signed it, went to the next race was at the Meadowlands. They brought me to the Meadowlands, put me in Marlboro gear and made a press conference and said, this is our new test driver. Basically, they told me, look, Rick's feet are banged up. He's in a lot of pain because he had broken his feet really bad. Emerson has a lot of business stuff going on. Roger said, basically, I need a guy that can go to the track and you're going to run all day. You're going to get to the track at 7 a.m. You're going to get in the car at 8 o'clock and you're going to run until we tell you to stop running. And you can get out of the car to go to the bathroom. So I'm like, okay. So basically that next week we went to Michigan. Never been on a super speedway. They put me out there and I ran really good right away. I did a 500-mile test in my first day. And literally I was in the car every week. I was testing somewhere for 2 or 3 days with a test team during that time. And that's I tested a bunch at Michigan because they were going to Michigan and I was always really quick when I went there. So they said my program got accelerated pretty fast, and they said, okay, we're going to run you at the Michigan race in August. I had basically signed with the team, at the end of May, right after qualifying. It was announced in June, right after the Indy 500. I was in the car, and then August, I was going to be my first race.
And you, unfortunately, you broke your leg in that first race at Michigan, but you recovered quickly because you were literally back in the car 5 races later at Nazareth.
Yeah.
And I was actually curious about your approach to that race. So kind of already have a bobble with the boss there right off the bat. You're getting back in this car at Nazareth.
That didn't go good because I qualified. I went to Michigan, qualified really well, 7th, and Roger came to me before the start of the race and he said, listen, I don't want you to do anything until 450 miles. He goes, I don't want you to pass anybody. If somebody passes you, you let them go. And when we get to 450 miles, then you can start racing guys. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Right. So green flag, go. Lap 2. I'm trying to I go to pass Scott Brayton and I draft up behind him coming off a 4. Car goes loose. I correct it and it's, I ran up too close on him because I'd done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of laps around Michigan by myself with nobody there. So I didn't really understand the whole, in Indy, I'd never been on a super speedway. I'd been on short ovals in an Indy Lights car with big wings on it. Now we got the tiny little speedway wings. I drafted up on Scott Brayton, got too close, and the rear went loose. I corrected it. It snapped back the other way, and I hit the wall head on and broke my leg in my first race, second lap, and helicopter out. In the hospital, and nobody from the team came to see me or called me or anything. I thought that's it. I thought I was fired right there. I thought that was the end of it.
Yeah, and so with that mindset, 5 races later, you're back in the CART Nazareth. Obviously, you mentioned you did a lot of testing there.
Yeah.
But what is your mindset going into that race? Is it more conservative, or is it the Paul Tracy mindset we all know of just go for it? How did you approach that race coming back after fearing you were going to lose your job?
There's a whole story to it. So they fly me to Indianapolis, the CART series. They have Dr. Trammell operate on my leg. They had to put a rod in my leg and a couple of pins. And, I'm in a cast, I got broken leg. And, 2 days after the surgery, there's this physical therapy place that they had me. I was staying in Indianapolis in a hotel, and they had me going to this. Roger basically told Trammell, "Look, I want him at this what's your physical therapy place?" And they had this place, where they had physical therapy place that had exercise machines, and he said, "I want him in there every day, and working out his upper body, doing whatever, until he can. When can he drive?" And Trammell said, he'll have to cast off probably in like 5 weeks, but maybe no weight bearing. So literally 5 weeks goes by. I get the cast off, and like I can't even walk yet. I'm on crutches. And Roger says, "Okay, we're going testing." He got the okay from Trammell to I can drive, but I can't walk on my leg. So they put me in the car. Luckily, I don't even know what leg it was. Yeah, it was my left leg. So I didn't, all I had to do was push the clutch with that leg. I was a right foot braker at that time. So all I had to do was get the clutch in. And we went back to Michigan and tested, and they said, "Okay, now you're gonna do 500 miles that you didn't complete at the race." And in the garage, there's my car that I smashed right there, and a big blue mark on the wall. Yet they hadn't painted over yet. So, I mean, that was probably the most scared I've ever been in my career, because I was just frightened to death of like, oh shit, like, what if I crash again here? But then, it took me like 20, 30 laps to kind of get up to speed again and like get over 215 miles an hour. And, but it was, basically then they took me to Nazareth, and I was still hardly walking at that point. And I finished well at Nazareth. I think I finished in the top 7 or 8 at Nazareth with, still, I probably shouldn't have been driving at that time, because I could hardly walk. That's how it was back in those days. I mean, there was no concussion protocols and impact tests and wait for you to heal. You just you got back up on the horse and went.
Absolutely. And so things did work out for you for 92. You almost raced the full season. You raced 2 cars. You raced the number 7 Mobil 1 car, and then you covered for Rick Mears after his injuries. But it was such a great year. You had several standout performances, and one of them I wanted to bring up to you was your second place at Michigan. So kind of got a little bit of redemption after the year before. There's that clip on social media that circulates every now and then where you pull into the pits and your team is applauding you for your finish, and Unser Jr. comes up and gives you the business. I was wondering if you could kind of recall that event, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so went back to Michigan. I started out the year, we started at Phoenix, and I was on a partial schedule. They were only going to run me about 4 or 5 races that year. And the start of it was Phoenix, and it was going to be Phoenix and Toronto, Michigan. There was Laguna. There was they had like a 5-race deal with Mobil 1 for me. And we went. I had a good run at Phoenix. Finished again in the top 6 or 7. I beat both Emerson and Rick in that race. I think I out-qualified him too. And then Indianapolis. Oh, I ran at Indy. Indy was part of the schedule too. And at Indianapolis, Rick crashed, flipped, and got hurt, broke his wrist. So then I filled in for him. I really probably could have won a couple races that year, but Penske had just developed a new gearbox, which was a sequential shift gearbox, which was like a straight pull sequential shift, which is what everything kind of went to. But we were the first ones to do that type of shifter. Everything else was an H pattern. And I had the sequential shifter in my car. Emerson didn't have it in his car, and it wasn't reliable. It would break, and it would get stuck in gear. It would get stuck in between 2 gears, or it would get a neutral and not be able to get any gears. So there was a bunch of races where I ran right up front, was in had the potential to win the race, and something would break, so the gearbox would break. So Michigan was up front, leading the whole way, like leading a lot. Scott Goodyear and I were like battling back and forth, and ultimately he was quicker than me at the end. But we were the only 2 cars on the lead lap in that race coming down to the end of the race, and there was a restart, I think, with with like 20 laps to go, and Scott was leading, I was second. Al Jr. was lined up behind us, but he was a lap or 2 behind the 2 of us, and then there was other cars that were third, fourth behind him. There was all jumbled up the field. So anyway, he got a big draft on me on the front straightaway, and he went to pass me going into 1, and I turned in on him and just took the air off of him and chopped his nose off, and kind of got rid of him. Well, he didn't like that. that didn't go over very very well with him. But that's how it was back in those days. I mean, if you did something another guy didn't like, like they would come get in your face and let you have it. And the racing now is just it's so different. Like there's far more respect for guys and taking the air off of guys or cutting guys off back then with the Unsers and the Andrettis and all the old school guys. But now, like when you watch the races now, these guys are like a bunch of freaking animals. They're just cutting each other off and running each other in the wall. And then they don't speak to each other after the race, and they go on Twitter and they badmouth each other on Twitter. It's just like nowadays it's totally different than it was back then,
Yeah, well, it's a fun clip. Do you enjoy seeing that? I'm sure it pops up in your social media. Do you laugh about it now?
Yeah, it's funny. I repost it sometimes just for just to see what people say, because people still like that. I mean people like that 90s and 2000s era of kart, I believe, way more than what they do now. Like that was kind of the golden era of IndyCar.
100%. Couldn't agree more on that. Speaking of that, one of those key times that make it a golden era was Michael Andretti left to Formula One for a year for 1993, and so a seat was vacant for a little bit before Nigel Mansell ultimately filled the seat. There was some talk on some of the broadcasts that there were a couple other drivers that Carl Haas was talking to. I don't know if your name was specifically mentioned, but in my research, they were talking to Al Jr. and they were talking to Paul Tracy. Did you have any real negotiations for that 1993 Newman-Haas seat?
No, I was under a long-term contract with Penske at that time. I was into my 3rd year with them, and was Rick retired. They didn't tell me that I was going to replace him. I kind of assumed that I was going to replace him. I just I had Marlboro team suits made up for me, and I was testing the car all the time. We were out here in Phoenix testing, and one day we're testing out a Firebird. And this is, they still hadn't announced me as the driver to replace Rick, and we're getting close to the start of the season. And, I'm testing out a Firebird, and Emerson was supposed to test the next day. And I'm testing, and I see these limos pull up at Firebird on the other side of the track. And that track at Firebird, there was no bridge to get in the track. So, all these limos pull up, and I'm going around, and I see these limos. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Right. So I come in the pits, and the limos come in and they cross the track, and Emerson gets out, and there's all these Brazilians and some press guys. And then Senna gets out of the car, and, they fit him in my car after the end of the day of testing. And so I was like, well, shit, maybe I'm not getting this ride. Maybe he's going to get it. So
yeah, there's a great documentary that you're in that Marshall Pruitt put together called The Test on YouTube. Highly recommend people go check it out. Really well done. Then that was actually my next question. So you answered that. And then 1993 is your coming out year. You have 5 wins, I think Long Beach, Cleveland, Toronto, Road America, and Laguna Seca. And you're racing against the best in the business, including the standing Formula One champion, Nigel Mansell. So I was wondering if you have any stories about either just hanging out or racing against Nigel Mansell in general. I'd be curious to get a good Nigel Mansell story.
I mean, I always got along really well with Nigel. Maybe it's because, him being English, my dad is Irish. They kind of hit it off with each other, and he was always very respectful to me. I think he'd seen me race in Europe, obviously followed what was going on, and probably in Formula Fords and whatnot. So he knew of me. But at 93 was probably a championship. He won the championship, but he won 5 races. I won 5 races. I threw away 3 wins. I was leading at Phoenix by 2 laps and crashed with 15 laps to 20 laps to go. Crashed out of the race. That was a guaranteed win there. Milwaukee, I was leading there by almost a lap, and Ari spun in front of me with another car, and I ended up getting involved in that and went out of that race with almost a lap lead on the field. And then at Mid-Ohio, we were coming down. I went on a streak after Milwaukee. I went on a streak of a bunch of wins. I won at Long Beach, and then got through Milwaukee. I was pretty far behind in the points because I'd had 2 DNFs, but then went on a streak of wins. I won at Cleveland. I won at Toronto, and was on a streak of chasing down Emerson and Nigel in the championship. And we're on the grid at Mid-Ohio, and I was on the pole, I think, either I was first or second, and Nigel was either first or second, and Emerson was third, and we're on the grid, and the team came to me and said, "Okay, we're getting down towards the end of the championship. If Emerson's close to you, you're going to pull over, and he needs the points, so you're going to have to team orders, and so he can challenge for the championship." And it just pissed me off so bad. I was seeing red over that. I was so mad because I was chasing them down because I was on a hot streak of wins, and I took off at the start. You can go back and watch the race, but I took the lead on start and just checked out. I had a 20-second lead in literally 10 laps. And the first lapped car I came up on, I was so mad. I thought to myself, you know what? If they tell me I got to pull over, I'm going to do it on the last lap. I'm going to stop at the start finish line and let Emerson go by and then cross the line. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lead this whole thing. And if they tell me I got to pull over, then I'm going to park it at the start finish line and do it. And I took the lead. I take off, and I'm going a second and a half a lap quicker than Nigel at Mid-Ohio, and I pull out like a 20-second lead in 10 laps. And the first lapped car I came up on was Scott Pruitt, and I ran up on him in the S's in the back, and he slowed down. I mean, obviously I'm lapping him in 15 laps, so I just ran up on him so fast. I locked up the brakes, and I slid off into the grass, and I went into the gravel trap and into the tire barrier. And because I was just so mad that I wanted to basically lap those guys, and just I was driving with the red mist, they used to call it.
Well, I got to ask a good follow-up question here. You coined the term the Pruitt fade. Is that potentially where that came from? Where did the Pruitt fade come from? I'm a giant Scott Pruitt fan.
He was in a bad car at that time. He was driving for some really small team in a year-old car, and it wasn't competitive. And I think it was called that car. I think it was Spirit of something, Spirit of America. It had some weird tobacco sponsorship on it, and it was a really small team, and it's uncompetitive car, and he just like I just ran up too fast on him, just drove off the track, you know.
Gotcha. Well, you ended up having a great season. I think third in the championship in '93, and then I wanted to get to '94 because then there's the whole thing with the Mercedes-Benz engine and the whole secret of bringing that to Indy and testing it. I'd love to hear your involvement in that testing program. Did you do a lot of the miles over there in Nazareth?
I pretty much probably did 80% of the miles of the testing of that engine, and you know, it's all in the book, The Beast. They had me basically going to Nazareth, Pennsylvania every week in testing through the winter. And it didn't matter if it was 25 degrees outside and snowing. I think there's pictures in the book of me going around the track with snowbanks on the track. You know, we would go out there, and, you know, the first time we ran the motor, it blew up in 20 laps. And then they would take it back to the shop, drop another motor in it, come back out the next day, run it again. And that's what we did pretty much. I was in the car 2 to 3 days a week, all through the winter. And the crazy part about that whole thing was Michael and Mario lived about 1.5 miles away from Nazareth Speedway on top of the hill, and you could see the track from their house because they were elevated and lived up on the hill in these mansions. And you could hear, I mean, it's a tiny town, right? You could hear the car running around the track because I'd be out there all day doing trying to do a 500-mile test, and neither of them came down to see what was going on. So nobody knew about this engine until it was announced.
Well, wild. And you end up getting, you guys show up to Indy. Obviously, Al Jr. wins the Indy 500, but you finished third in the championship again, 2 consecutive years in a row. And somehow at the end of the season, you're the odd man out when Penske Racing reduces to a 2-car team. But you have a couple opportunities that show up. One, I think you got a testing opportunity with Benetton for the 94 or 95 season, I think. And then ultimately you end up at Newman-Haas Racing. Could you walk me through that decision?
Well, the decision really was, you know, it was just a situation where there was some tobacco legislation that was going on, and they were trying to ban tobacco sponsorship in sports. And, obviously 94, you know, it was Marlboro, Team Penske was everywhere, right? We won all the races, got all the media, billboards on the freeways, and, you know, you could advertise tobacco everywhere, right? And we dominated the whole thing. And now the government's trying to clamp down on tobacco advertising. They banned billboards in stadiums. They banned billboards in arenas. They banned billboards at concerts. And they were going after banning it in racing. So Marlboro had decided we're going to pull back from 3 cars to 2. And Roger came to me and he said, "Well, you know, I got Al Jr. and I got Emerson's at the end of his contract. He's been with Marlboro for his whole career. I'm gonna put you in a satellite team with Gary Bettenhausen, and you know, I'm gonna run you for a year or 2 over there, and then when Emerson decides to retire, then you can come back." And I mean, that didn't sound very great to me because Bettenhausen at that time was running a year-old car. And we went back, and my dad got the contract out that we had signed, which was a 5-year contract that we weren't allowed to read or have a lawyer read over it, right? And my dad went through the contract with a lawyer, and there was a stipulation in the contract that it said that if Roger wanted to place me at a different team or drive for somebody else other than Penske Racing, it had to be mutually agreed upon by both parties. Let me back up first. Like, my contract was 5 years, and what I was getting paid in those first 5 years. The first year I got paid $25,000. The second year I got $50,000. The third year I got $75,000. The fourth year I got $100,000, and the fifth year was going to be $125,000. And I got 50% of the prize money. But the prize money was pretty good in those days. But Emerson and Al were getting $4 million a year, right? And I was making $75,000 and out running, running right with those guys. So my dad went to Penske and he said, "Hey, Paul's had a great year. If you think we can get a raise, he's doing really good and he's doing all the testing." And Roger was like, "Nope, you signed the contract." So fast forward, Roger wants to move me into a separate team. There's a clause in the contract that says that has to be agreed and signed off on by both parties for that to happen. My dad went back to Roger and said, "Hey, there's a clause here. You can't assign Paul to a different team. We're not going to do that. We have, interest somewhere else." And Roger was like, "Yeah, but. My dad said, "You signed the contract." Right. So I, with Nigel coming over and being the current Formula One world champion, and I was, running right with him, battling with him. There was interest in Formula One. Bernie Ecclestone and my dad had a previous relationship. My dad's from Ireland. Bernie Ecclestone's from Ireland. Somehow they knew each other from way back in the day. Bernie at that time in the 70s was a used car salesman. My dad is a wheeler dealer car guy. Somehow they knew each other from Ireland, because Ireland's small and there's like all the Irish guys all know each other, right? So there was interest from him to put me in F1. We went over and did a test. I went to Estoril, had a really good test with Benetton, and I was offered a contract by Benetton through Flavio Briatore, and it wasn't a good contract. There was no guarantees that I was going to race the car. It was just kind of like, sign this management contract and I take half of everything you earn the rest of your life, and maybe we'll put you in the car, maybe we won't. And then I had an offer from Carl Haas and Paul Newman to drive for them and their Budweiser car. And they were going to pay me like $1.7 million to drive the car. And it was top team. They just won the championship. And I thought, at that time, okay, I'm only 23 or 4 years old. I want to win a championship. Another opportunity in Formula One will come along down the road. So I ultimately signed with Newman-Haas on a one year deal with them.
It's been described that you were on loan from Penske. Is that true? Or like when you were with Newman-Haas, were you like, I'm going back to Penske, or that just naturally happened?
No, they the Budweiser deal, I think had 1 year left on its contract, and all Carl wanted to do was sign a 1 year deal until he could renew the sponsorship with Budweiser or Kmart or whatever it was going to be. So, that was fine. I get that. But halfway after Indianapolis, I was running well. I won at Milwaukee. Was running fast at Indy in Carl's car. That year, 95, Penske didn't qualify at Indianapolis. And I was walking down the pit lane at Indy and ran into Roger, and he said, "Hey, come to my office after qualifying next week. I need to talk to you." And I'm like, "Okay." And qualified, and he knew that I only had a 1 year deal, and he said, "I want you to come back." He goes, I'm going to move Emerson into the Bettenhausen team, and you can have the Marlboro car. He goes, "What do you want to drive?" And I said, "I don't want anything more. I don't want anything less than what they make. So I want to be treated the same. I want to be treated equal." And they signed me to Roger signed me to a 5-year deal on the same amount of salary that Al Jr. was making, which was fine.
Yeah. So you ended up back at Penske, and for 96, it was the first year of the split. When they announced it back in 94, I think they announced it at Surfers Paradise, and by they, I mean the Indy Racing League and Tony George. Were you shocked that it actually came to fruition? Like the IRL actually happened?
I mean, I wasn't shocked. There was a lot of politics going on then, and like basically, there was Roger and Pat Patrick ran CART. They had all the say. And they had a board of directors, and they all had these voting system of guys, team owners who were on this board. Tony George was also on the board, and he had one vote in this thing. And I mean, you've probably read the books on it, but basically, Tony wanted 2 votes on it, and Roger and Pat Patrick told him, pound sand, you're not getting 2 votes. Take it or leave it. You can have your 1 vote, or too bad. And he threatened them and said, well, I'll start my own series. And they said, go ahead. Right. And that's basically how the split happened. It was really just over who was in control of, and who was, who was the big cheese. Right. And it was at that time, it was Roger and Pat Patrick, and they weren't willing to play ball with Tony George in terms of giving him more votes on this board of this, who makes the decisions.
Yeah, so you guys compete directly against Indy 500 96 with the US 500 going head to head. Did that feel like a big event to you, or did it just feel like another race at Michigan?
No, it was a big event. It was full. I mean, the place was full. Grandstands were full, and we come down to the green flag, and half the field gets wiped out on the pace lap. It was a bit of a disaster, that race. It was kind of like, that was like worst case scenario. I don't know what was going on. One of the cars at the front was warming their tires up still, or got on the throttle and kind of swerved a little bit, hooked wheels with somebody, and like wiped out, half the cars in the field before we even got to the green.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the split, not a great thing for open wheel racing. I do want to fast forward a bit. I just want to be mindful of your time. Let's go to 2001, Texas Motor Speedway, traditionally an IRL track. You guys, CART, go to race there and are taking on a lot of G-force, both laterally and otherwise. That's causing some drivers to lose consciousness, maybe for a bit of time. What was your experience at Texas, and did you think the CART series made the right decision to not race that weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it was a good decision or a bad decision. I think they probably could have slowed the cars down, and we could have ran. They could have stuck a big wicker on the car and slowed the cars down a bunch, or taken boost out and take a bunch of horsepower away, and we could have run. But for whatever reason, I had the fastest practice lap going into qualifying. I think I ran 2:37 average in final practice, and guys that were making longer runs were saying they got dizzy. Michael Andretti said he got dizzy. And Michael was super vocal that he didn't want to race. He just thought somebody was going to get hurt running those speeds. I didn't experience getting dizzy, but I will say that, after you did like a 10-lap run, I would get out of the car and kind of like be walking a little bit sideways, because all the blood in your body would get pushed to one side of you somehow. And I'd get out of the car, and you'd be like kind of like falling over a little bit, which was a weird sensation. But, ultimately, should we have run there? I believe we shouldn't have packed up and left. I believe that the series should have made every attempt to put on a show. Slow the cars down. We were running little tiny wings, no wickers. We could have put a big wicker on the back wing. We could have taken boost out of them, slowed them down. But for whatever reason, the engine manufacturers, I think they kicked around the idea of doing something with mapping and boost, and they couldn't get Honda, Ford, and Toyota to agree on anything, because they said, oh, well, we can't do that because of this, or we can't do that because of that. And none of them would agree to doing anything with mapping, fuel mixtures, and boost. And we packed up and left. And that was a huge, I think that was probably one of the biggest black eyes for CART at that time, you know?
Yeah, definitely not a good weekend, and I think it led to some lawsuits, if I recall correctly. Also in 2001, you guys had September 11th. Obviously, you guys were traveling overseas in Germany. I was wondering if you could share your memories of the day of September 11th and what you were doing.
I remember it clear as day because I was like, I was there and practice hadn't started yet, and I was walking around in the garage, and that track, you had all these garages where the cars were, and then behind the garages they had these like little temporary, what would you call them, like like those temporary like little school huts, like temporary buildings. Yeah, like all these little temporary buildings behind the garage area where we could get, there was a driver lounge for the team and then an engineering room. And I was walking around, and then all of a sudden I realized there was like nobody's around. I'm like, what the hell is everybody? Everybody's gone. I think I went to the bathroom and I came back out, and like literally everybody was gone. There's no mechanics around. There's nobody walking around behind the garages. And I went in our engineering thing when there was a TV in there, and everybody's looking at the TV. And the first plane had already hit the thing, and they were watching the news, and like all of a sudden, like a few minutes later, the second plane hits. They, obviously terrorist attack. Now what do we do? There's going to be terror attacks all over the world. The series basically decided, okay, we can't run today. We had to speak with the government in the States. What do we do? There was all this kind of political, what's next? All flights are grounded worldwide, right? The whole thing is it's like a shit show. And ultimately they just, they got the agreement with the U.S. government to, the race was okay to happen, and we got limited practice and limited time on the track, but they ultimately decided to run the race on Sunday. Flights worldwide was still like completely stopped, so we didn't know if we were getting the race was on Sunday, and we didn't know if we were getting home or not. Nobody knew anything. And then we went to the airport, and it was crazy. I remember that it took like hours and hours and hours to get through TSA because of the security checks where people they went through everything, right? Just tore all your bags apart and went through all your stuff. So the lines at the, I don't know what airport we flew out of. That was either Frankfurt or somewhere like that. And it was just insane to try to get through security at that time.
Yeah. Crazy time period in life. And then continuing to transition a bit here, not looking to relitigate the 2002 Indy 500, but many people believe you obviously won the race based on some data. I'm just wondering, over 20 years later, when you bump into Tony George or Hélio Castroneves.
I got it. I'm going to scoot this over. I got a picture right over here of the right there.
There you go. That's all the evidence we need. So I'm just wondering, when you run into Tony George or Hélio Castroneves, does it just come up in the back of your mind? Is there bitter feelings? Do you guys joke about it? What happens today when you run into those guys?
About it, but Hélio won't talk about it to anybody, and I don't know if you've ever interviewed Hélio, or he won't speak about it. So that's one thing that's off limits to him. Look, ultimately, his response, people ask him or say something. I've seen a couple interviews where people have said, Paul thinks he won the Indy 500, and there's evidence of Paul was there. I mean, there's a clip on YouTube of the pass, and where the light goes from green to yellow, and you can see that I'm clearly ahead of him when the light changed to yellow. And Hélio's only ever response that I've seen him say is, yeah, well, the trophy's in my house, is his response. So, it was basically, in my opinion, I know that I was ahead of him when the light was yellow. They won in a court on a technicality of there was a clause in the rule book in the IRL rulebook that said if a judgment call is made by the chief steward, it's unprotestable. And we did this whole kangaroo court of appeal. We had all the evidence, we had video evidence, we had picture evidence, we had all this stuff, timing lines, all this stuff showed that I was ahead. And there was a clause in the rule book that said a judgment call by the chief steward is unprotestable. And Penske's lawyers said, look, rule right here. Judgment call was made by Brian Barnhart that car 3 was a ahead of car 26. It's not protestable. And that's what they went with. So it was won on a technicality. Not the first time that Penske won on a technicality, because if you rewind and go back to Unser Jr. and Mario Andretti, they won on the same way. They won in court on that too.
Well, one of those moments that sticks out in history of the sport. And I'll transition a little bit more here forward. You were with Team Cool Green at that time, and they decided to, so that was in 2002 when Indy happened. For the next year, the manufacturers, I believe, left and went to the IRL and left Champ Car. So Team Cool Green decided to go to the IRL as well. You didn't go with them.
No.
You went to Foresight Racing. Can you talk to me a little bit about that decision to stay with Champ Car and not go to the IRL?
Well, I mean, it was a combination of things. One, the Indy 500, I was so pissed off with that I did not want to go in the IRL full time. I didn't mind running on ovals. I liked ovals, but I didn't want to do that full time either. I wanted to be able to race in Toronto and Vancouver and Edmonton and race at Long Beach. And they were moving. Michael had bought the team and was going to transition it. He bought it from Barry Green and was going to transition it over to the IRL, which was all ovals at that time, and the Indy 500. And I was so pissed off with the IRL and over what had happened at Indy that was the last thing in the world at that time that I wanted to do. So Players and Cool, I don't know if you know this, but Players and Cool is ultimately under the same umbrella company-wise. British American Tobacco owned both brands. So the guy who ran the Cool program was a guy named Bob Bexon. And he was originally at Players when they signed Jacques Villeneuve. And he was with Players then. And then he moved within the company, British American Tobacco. They moved him to the Cool brand to start the Cool brand. So he started a racing program with Barry Green, who was with Players, the Players Foresight team when they won. So they started a deal with Cool. He was a big fan of mine, really liked me. And he had, after Jacques had left to go to Formula One, they had approached me to drive for Players, but I was under contract to Roger at the time. This was in like 96 and 7. I just signed with Penske a long-term contract. So I wasn't available. Players wanted me at that time. So anyway, I got fired from Penske in 97. Bob Bexon was the guy's name. They had just started the Cool program in 97 and they'd hired Dario. I called when I got fired from Penske. My first call was to Jerry Forsythe and said, "Hey, I just got let go from Penske. You got anything available in your second car?" And he said, I just signed Tagliani yesterday. I don't have a seat. I literally just signed him. So my next call was to Barry Green, and they were running a one-car program for Dario. So I called Barry Green. I'm like, "Hey, do you guys have anything? Blah, blah, blah. I just got let go." And he's like, "Oh, give me an hour. I'll call you back." So anyway, within 10 hours, I had a contract with Team Cool Green they started a second car for me to drive there. And that was simply because Bob Bexon, who started the Players program, started the Cool program, wanted me to drive for him. Now, fast forward when Team Cool Green went IRL. Michael bought the team. Bob Bexon had gone back to Players to work at Players, and he said, "You're coming to drive for me. We need to win the championship in IndyCar, and sign me to a deal to drive for Players." So my connection with the whole Players and Cool and Players was simply because of a guy named Bob Bexon, who was back and forth between those two brands.
Yeah, and we're grateful he kept you in the series after your '97 let go from Penske. And so you went on to pretty much dominate the 2003 Kart World Series with a little bit of competition from Bourdais.
Yeah.
And you won at your home track, Toronto, for the second time. I was wondering, it must be euphoric to win at your home track. I'd love to hear your perspective of that.
Well, I mean, for me, the races in Canada were the biggest races of the year for me. They were the most important for me to do well at. My hometown was probably the biggest race of the year for me, and the most pressure. And I was lucky enough to win. I won there twice in Toronto. I won in Vancouver 3 times. Scored podiums in Edmonton. Scored podium in Montreal. So running well in my home country was always super important to me.
Yeah, and then the kart series, I think, later became Champ Car. Towards the end there, the final season, you guys started racing the DP01, so a brand new chassis. I would love to get your thoughts on that. And then the series merged, and they ended up keeping the older IRL chassis versus the DP01. I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on that.
Well, the DP01, ironically, the DP01 was a very quick car. It was built by Don Panos. It was basically the same car that they used in Super Formula over in Europe, but in Super Formula they ran a V10 or a V12 Renault motor in it. It was a very, very quick car. I would say probably quicker than the current Indy car to this day, because these places like Road America, I mean, still they're 2 to 3 seconds a lap. The current car is 2 to 3 seconds a lap slower than that DP01. And ironically, my old crew chief, there's a guy named Steve Moore. He's out of Brownsburg, Indiana. He just recently bought 7 cars from Forsyth and about 15 Cosworth motors, and he's restored them all because they've been sitting in a barn on Forsyth's farm, and he restored them, has got them up running. And he's actually coming out here to Arizona in 10 days, and I'm actually going to drive my last race-winning car at our local country club track out here at Apex Motorsports. So that's going to be a pretty cool little treat for me to get back behind the wheel of what I believe is the last really fast IndyCar. There's no disrespect to what they're currently running now, but if you've watched my podcasts and you listen to the fans, and I ask the drivers that are current, like, what's your favorite race car? What's your favorite era of car? And everybody says, that mid 90s through the 2000s, those were the best cars. Those were the fastest cars. And those were the cars I wish I was still driving now. They've had to try to bring the cost down in IndyCar, although not effective because the budgets are still $20 million. But I get that the windshield is a great safety innovation, but it's sure not to me, it's not a pretty looking car. When you go back and look at those cars like the Lola that's in this painting right behind me, or the Reynard, or that Panos car, those cars look fast, just sitting still. They look like they're going 200 miles an hour.
Absolutely. I like the ones, I think 96, 98 era, when they'd have the big fin on the back at Michigan Motor Speedway. I always think about the Pac West cars always look pretty slick in that. Did you think the DP01 would have been compatible in the IRL format, like on ovals and Indy, or is that why? I'm just confused why they didn't go with that car, because the other IRL chassis at the time was just quite ugly.
That could have been a question mark, because the IRL chassis were built with intrusion panels and things like that for oval races. I'm not quite sure whether the Panos was built that way, because in 07, 08, we didn't have any more ovals. Could the car have run on an oval? I think it could have run on an oval, but I think you would probably have had to beef it up, the tub and the structure of it for crashes above 200 miles an hour. Now, we ran the car right behind us. We ran those on ovals. We ran them those cars ran at Indy. They ran at Michigan. They ran at Las Vegas Motor Speedway and Texas at 237 miles an hour without a problem. So I think anything could have been done in that era, but the IRL had a contract with Dallara to build their cars, and that's the direction they went. And they've stayed with that now. Okay, but the current car in IndyCar, IndyCar's, it's great. I love the racing. I think the drivers, I think there's a great dynamic of drivers. There's a lot of guys with a lot of character. It has all the ingredients to be great, but it's a 14-year-old car now. And I think, I've given my opinion a million times to people about what I think is going to turn IndyCar around. And I think they need a new, fast, super fast car that's attractive looking. And they keep pushing it off. They keep saying, oh, we're going to have a new car in 26. Oh, then it got pushed off to 27. And now I think they pushed it off to 28. So, this car, the Dallara that they're running now, by the time they get a new car, the thing is going to be like 18 years old, design. So it's like, it's, the days of when in my era, we got a new car every year. There'd be a new car, new aero updates and changes to the suspension and changes to the side pods and the underwing and the wings. Everything would be, every year there'd be something new. And I think that excites the fans about getting them excited about the sport.
Oh, 100%, 100%. They could just copy the design of the old cars, and I think they'd be off to a good start. But I've taken up so much of your time, so I'll just, with one final question. You've mentored a lot of young drivers over the years, especially young karters. For someone that's getting involved in the sport or wants to pursue a career in IndyCar today, what's your advice for them?
It's tough. It's the thing I tell kids now is can you still make it without money? Obviously there's kids out there that are quick and they also have a lot of money. Either they have a sponsor or they have a rich dad. And can you make it anymore? And I tell kids, I meet a lot of kids that don't have any money. And I said, the bottom line is you got to win. And if you're winning everything and kicking ass and winning championships, you're going to get noticed. If you win at, every level going up and win every championship going up, you'll make it. But at the end of the day, if you're average, and you're finishing top 5 and you don't have any money and there's another kid who's running that can run top 5, top 6, and his dad's got $3 million, if you're the team owner, you're going to take the kid with no money or the kid that's at the same level that's his dad's going to give you $3 million, So at the end of the day, for the kids that are trying to come up that don't have a sponsor or a rich dad, you got to kick ass. You got to win everything. You got to win every championship, and then you'll get noticed. And that's the bottom line is the winners will make it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And Paul Tracy, thank you so much for making time, being so candid with the interview. This was a huge honor for me, and really encourage people. Most people have probably heard your podcast, Racer Unchained, but if not, immediately go binge watch it. It's excellent. Thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah, we got a lot of good guys coming up. I've got a lot of F1 guys that we're filming with. Just did a couple F1 guys this week. Got more next week. We got Villeneuve and Salo and a bunch of guys. I'm hoping to get Zach Brown on there. Got Derek Daly's going to talk about the time in the 70s. So we're kind of going a little bit from the old IndyCar stuff. We're going to talk to the first few episodes this year. We're going to have a little bit of F1 stuff before the season starts with F1.
Oh, I can't wait. That's amazing. That's amazing. All right. Well, we look forward to it. And Paul, thanks so much, man.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Paul Tracy. And I owe a great bit of gratitude to the folks at TruSpeed Autosport, and specifically Tyler Tadovic, who made that conversation possible. They've been incredibly supportive behind the scenes. So thank you to Tyler and the folks at TruSpeed Autosport. And I want to talk a little bit more about how they've supported me here in a minute. But TruSpeed, they're based out at the Thermal Club. And essentially what they do is they provide arrive and drive services for anyone that has a high performance car that wants to get out on the track and do some hot laps. So whether it's getting your car tuned up, maintained, whether you need storage, whether you need transportation, they do it all to make sure that you have a really good experience when you get out at the track. So Tyler and the team have been incredibly supportive of me because I'm a very, very new entrant to this world of telling stories in motorsport, and it's a very populated arena, if you will. So obviously you have Racers Unchained, you have Marshall Pruitt, you have David Land, you got Hinch and Rossi, Connor Daly. All these people are doing these amazing podcasts and content creation around this subject, and yet I've made the decision to come over here and participate. I'm not new to YouTube. I've been on YouTube for over a decade now on my other channel, Blue Angel Phantoms, where I tell the history of the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. My interest there, my grandfather was the first flight lead of the Blue Angels back in 1946. So I love history and I love storytelling. And, growing up at the track with my dad, I'm sure many of you remember your first race. My first race I attended was 1991, the Marlboro Challenge, the one where Michael Andretti passed Rick Mears in the last turn of the last lap. I still remember the sights and sounds from that day. And it left a lasting impact. And so that was really how I bonded with my father. He'd take me to Laguna Seca every year. He took me to the Indy 500 in 1996. But we were giant Scott Pruitt fans. My father and his company were an associate sponsor of Scott Pruitt at the 1991 Indy 500 when he raced for TruSports. And specifically, I really enjoyed the business aspect of IndyCar racing, understanding the sponsorship and the dollars required to pursue a career in racing. And thus, a lot of the questions you hear on this podcast are more about the business side and the people side of things. So as someone who's a new creator, I've obviously hit a number of headwinds because I'm an unproven quantity in this space. And that's really where Tyler has stepped up and been a huge supporter and providing some credibility for me as he's made outreaches on my behalf. And so Tyler, if you see this, I'm incredibly grateful for your support. And I guess I should definitely tell people that there'll be a couple more episodes that directly as a result of your support that have already been recorded and the guest really delivered. One is a former driver of Foresight and one drove for Penske as well as did some testing. So a lot to look forward to on this channel as a direct result of the support of the TruSpeed Autosport folks. And before I sign off here, I also have to thank all the guests that had done this podcast before I ever launched it. A lot of the initial podcasts were recorded before the channel launched. So we're talking PJ Jones, Richie Hearn, Dr. Jack Miller, Robbie McGee, Jeff Andretti, and Michelle Jourdain all took a chance to do an interview with me. I'm incredibly grateful. And so that being said, I'm going to sign off here and I will see you in the next interview.